Lloyd Hawkeye Robertson, president of the New Enlightenment Project. Our project promotes open discussion and free debate in the application of New Enlightenment values and skills to modern conditions. Now, few things are more central to the human condition than sexuality and gender. Our guest today was confronted with the politics of gender and trans identity after she wrote an article questioning a BC Supreme Court practice directive. That directive said that people appearing in court should be prompted to name their correct gender pronouns. Colonial lawyer Shahdin Farsai said this amounted to compelled speech, invaded privacy rights, and put the impartiality of courts into question. Her legal argument was initially accepted for publication in a BC law journal called The Advocate, but that acceptance was canceled following a campaign that threatened the journal's funding. An abbreviated version of her article was then published in Canadian Lawyer, but it was removed after a similar campaign. Later in 2021, Shahdin seconded a motion at the BC Law Society's annual general meeting affirming that no topic should be exempt from professional debate. Shahdin, welcome. I want to ask you about your article and that subsequent motion that I just referenced, but first I want to learn a little bit about your background. Your family fled Iran when you were 3 years old. What were the conditions that led to your family becoming refugees?
Okay, first I just want to say thank you to everyone for having me. I think it's wonderful that the New Enlightenment Project is in existence at this time in society, because we definitely need more free thinking and open debate, which is what you guys are all about. So I was born in Tehran, Iran. My mother was widowed before I was born, so single mom with my brother's 2 years older. That was in 1984, and I think that we are then in the midst of the Iran-Iraq war. So in about 86, 87, essentially my mother paid Turkish smugglers to get her out with my brother and I. So by that time I was about 2.5 years old, so somewhere around there. And there was a lot of them. It wasn't just us just trying to get to leave Iran. And many Iranians had family members in England, Germany. My mother's brother lived in Stockholm, Sweden. So we tried to go there, but her immigration application was rejected. So anyways, long story short, I do remember vaguely going through the bushes of Turkey and being in some random trucks with burlap. It's a bit of a blur, but I do remember a little bit of that. So then we were in Turkey just temporarily for 6 months. Eventually, we made our way to Athens, Greece, and I think at that time there was just a bit of a refugee grouping from Ethiopia, from different parts of Africa and the Middle East and Iraq, and we ended up in the same order, the Sisters of Charity, the same Catholic Church order that Mother Teresa was involved with, and they took us in, and there we are with all these other refugee families. And eventually, through I think it was the UN refugee program, my mother tried to find work in Greece, and then eventually it evolved to potential sponsorship to immigrate to Canada. And this was literally like the golden ticket of our life. So there was a Christian missionary church out of Markham, Ontario. And I think that there was perhaps a woman that passed away in that church, and part of her estate and her will wanted to privately sponsor a needy family. And it was just by the grace of God that we were the chosen ones for that. So it was a private sponsorship, but indirectly we were counted as refugees. I mean, my mother, she remembers that she even had to pay back the Canadian government her flight, the cost of her flight, because the contract with the church was only for a year, right, just to help us get established in Canada. And then, of course, my mother had to continue education. And so we were in Ontario for about 2 years. And so came to Canada when I was 8, 2 years in Ontario, then moved to BC. We had a friend also from Iran that we had met in Greece, and his family had moved to BC, and he said, "Oh, BC's much better. Forget the crazy winters in Ontario." So we did, and we moved out west, and that would be 94.
Okay, so the rest is history then. You settled in BC, where the climate is more pleasant, southern BC anyway, and you became a lawyer. You've been practicing, I understand, since 2016. Why did you choose that profession?
So I guess, well, I think I was always about human rights. I remember in high school, I had started an Amnesty International human rights group. And I don't know if anybody knows the case of Mumia Abu Jamal out of the US. And then the case of the Cuban Five. There was a lot of, in your teens, I guess, I was listening to Rage Against the Machine, and I was aware of a lot of political issues. And maybe because of my background, I was obviously aware of political issues from Iran. And I mean, if you're Persian, it doesn't take to go so far to know somebody who was executed under either the Shah's regime or thereafter the theocratic regime that's in place right now. So I mean, it was always part of our household discussions, just political issues. And I just always gravitated towards that in high school. And I just hung out with other like-minded students, and we started up these various groups. And, I was a staunch vegan from the age of like 16, I became a vegetarian. So going into law, first it was journalism. I got accepted into Ryerson's journalism program, but now, thank God, I didn't go down that path, given what I've heard about Ryerson's. Basically, it's a social justice advocacy journalism program. So law was always plan A, and I'll just give you a bit of there was a bit of a detour. So I thought that I did my bachelor's in political science at SFU with a minors in gender studies. And then I did a master's in public policy. I don't know why, but I think somewhere along the way I was like, oh, I don't think I'm smart enough for law, or something like that, or I'm too. I went to law school a little bit older than others. I think it was like 29 or something like that, so a little bit older than the average. And I did my master's in public policy, and I thought I would work for the government and policy development. And then the 2010 recession happened. I don't know if you remember that. No jobs. The government was not doing any more permanent contracts. Worked in the private sector a little bit. And then I thought, okay, you know what? Let's just go back to what you originally wanted from the beginning. So just a personal development, I guess. It just took me time to have that confidence in myself to go to law school, which I eventually did. I went to Ottawa U, and it was perfect. I mean, it's exactly what you would have wanted to discuss: human rights, you discuss various private rights, contract rights, and it was definitely the best thing I ever did. I would definitely recommend it.
Well, subsequent things happened that could have questioned that commitment to the value of the legal profession. We'll get to that right away. The practice directive of December 16th, 2020 declared that people in BC courts are to provide their correct pronouns. I want to ask you, what's the big deal here? Why not just state your pronouns and those of your clients and get on with whatever the legal action is? Why is this an issue?
Okay, so there's the elephant in the room, which is called other rights, right? Witness rights, the right of lawyers to either defend or prosecute and present their case as they see fit. If you think that language does not impact how you present a case, then you have no clue what's going on. Language is the tool of the lawyer and the witness when they're on the stand. How are they giving evidence under oath? Language. If you start, and I don't mean that like, courtesy, call this person Mrs. or no, when you start changing their evidence under oath to suit another person's subjective identity, there's a huge and massive clash of rights. And what I was trying to say in my paper is, listen, I get it. There have been movements, just as all civil rights movements, and the transgender rights movement is no different. And I would not expect anything less that they would very valiantly and aggressively pursue their rights. But we live in a pluralistic society. There's no hierarchy of rights here. And if anybody thinks that there is a hierarchy, no, every single scenario within the legal world requires the judge to grapple with these competing rights and interests. And I was just floored by how the Supreme Court of BC and the provincial court and the Court of Appeal, which has something a little similar but a little different, would have just issued such a directive requiring everyone to just play in this role that you believe that gender is completely subjective, and I need you to tell me your gender, and the fact that how you may appear or come across to me has no bearing. And then so there's the issue of witness rights, lawyers' rights to their clients, which, and I can go into details of how that's problematic and the conundrums that it raises. And then there's privacy rights. If there are people genuinely struggling with gender identity and you put them on the spot and you require an answer, that's not necessary for the proceeding. That's just a complete overreach of privacy. And I think it is a bit akin to like asking someone their orientation, because we know those two are a sexual orientation. Those two can be, not always, they can be intertwined. And lastly, and again, we can go into this further, if anybody has been paying attention to the news, issues of gender identity are either in courts right now on various fronts. For example, blood donation, right? There's been having to state your sex for blood donations, whether you want to compete in different sex categories. That's all being contested in courts. It's hotly debated. It's a very emotional issue that's out there in the world. And for the judges, for the court to issue a formal court direction telling you will give me, that's how I read it, right? And I can tell you, one of my colleagues didn't send a letter to the court saying, are you seriously saying this is like mandatory? And they came back with some ambiguous letter. The direction tells you that you can say that. Well, we already knew that. People were already giving their pronouns before this direction came out. Whether or not you follow it, whether the judge that's a different story. But nothing was stopping you from showing up in court and announcing your pronouns. But making it an official court policy and forgetting how does the optics of judicial impartiality and independence, when those cases do come before the court, where the court's going to be struggling with issues of biological reality and subjective gender identity, did it not occur to them that it looks like the issue has been prejudged?
So before this directive, it was a voluntary. People could announce their pronouns if they chose, but it was voluntary, and they were announcing their preferred pronouns. But Justice Hinkson used the term correct pronouns. What's the difference between correct pronouns and preferred pronouns, or is there one?
That's the $1 million question. So when my colleagues and I initially read this directive, we were like, okay, grammatically correct, unless someone has another opinion. I think that, the English language, and there are languages that just have a kind of gender neutral pronoun. There's actually many, but French and in English, we use he and she. So grammatically correct, I don't even know. Is it an issue about grammar? It's what you perceive. And we know what biological markers make a he and she. I mean, they want to try to do away with that, but I'm sorry, I don't think we're going to get rid of the use of the way that this language has been used up to this point in many other languages. The fact that we are a dimorphic species, and surprise, our language is going to reflect that, right? So saying incorrect, what else could that mean? I mean, it's got to match the perceived sex of that person. Preferred is what I think that they were getting at, right? So try to couch this as if like, oh, but their preferred is the correct one, so you got to use correct, and the word correct sounds authoritative. It's not. At the end of the day, it's still subjective gendered identity. It's still self-declaration.
Okay, so you made these arguments, and you wrote them in, put them in an article that was accepted for publication. And the advocate, the editor of the Advocate, approached the other side, if you will, for an alternate opinion to run both articles or both opinions side by side, but the other side chose not to do that. They chose to censor you instead of debate you. At this point, did the issue change from being about pronouns to being about censorship?
So what happened was, at that time, I was in touch with the editor. So the editor contacted me and said, you know what, it would be, especially given that it's a legal magazine, that lawyers argue, we like to debate, and that's the whole point. You go to court, normally it's two sides, adversarial. The judge gets the benefit of the full complement of legal argument, and goes off and renders a decision. And that's what we like. That's what we are trained to do. So he made the most natural suggestion. Shahdin, let's get the other side. We got your side. Maybe I'll give you the right of rebuttal, right? And without even a second's thought, I thought, absolutely, send this off to the group, and I can just to back up. So before this direction was issued, the CBA BC, the Canadian Bar Association BC chapter of the Sexual Orientation, Gender Identity Community subsection. So there's like the estate subsection, there's the contracts law animal law subsection. Lawyers under this umbrella organization, there's a national Canadian Bar Association. You can set up your own subsection as you please, and obviously, this is one group of lawyers, and they somehow got the ear of the provincial and Supreme Court and said, there's an issue here we'd like to discuss. They did present it to them, that you should consider some kind of court procedure that incorporates the announcement of gender pronouns. Obviously, no one else was consulted, just them. Because I know how they pitch it. They say there's incredible harm, damage, humiliation. They tie it to death where someone is misgendered. You got to fix this. This is the human rights issue. And surprise, they issued that. So then the editor of the Advocate says, I'm going to go to this group that pushed for this and ask them for their opinion. Without even thinking, legally, how can I rebut Shahdin's argument? They said, this is hate speech. If you publish this, you will likely be sued under the BC Human Rights Code for discriminatory publication. And there's issues with that. So obviously, the editor is scared out of his mind. He obtains a legal opinion, from what he informed me, that this could expose the magazine. And he said, Shahdin, I'm sorry, but we can't print this. And then, of course, going off, oh, there's actually legal errors. I'm like, okay, give me the opportunity to correct it. If you say there's some legal errors, and we started to go into, it was kind of funny because somebody else, some other proponents called him and said, oh, that's actually not right. Then tell me that I'm not right. Then write an article saying how flawed my argument is. Educate me, enlighten me, right? So anyways, they didn't give, so the editor got freaked out. The whole thing fell apart. And then he came out with something later, like a letter from the editor saying that this happened because he got lots of pushback. People also contacted him once they found out that he declined to publish and just said, like, what are you doing? This is a legal publication. You caved, et cetera, et cetera. So he was in a tight spot. And then I don't know if you want me to go into what happened with the second try to get the article published.
With Canadian Lawyer? Well,
Yeah.
let's get to that. I've got another question I'd like to know first. The other side here, the people that decided not to reply to your article with their arguments, but to try to cancel your article. Did you get the sense that they're mostly trans-identified individual, or are they part of some other or general movement?
I feel like I looked at the composition of their group. I'm going to say that some of them had pronouns of they. I'm just going to presume that maybe that they're fluid. Some of them probably did identify as being trans, but given the history and given the majority of the composition, it's actually either straight allies or gay lesbians, lawyers, right, within that group. I can't really I don't really know what their composition is, because I can just go off of their pronouns and just like what I've seen on Twitter from them. But they're definitely, I have to just pause, and I did make a point of this. When I see, just even in broader society, the attack on anybody who criticizes even an iota of criticism to any kind of transgender rights agenda, it doesn't actually always come from trans individuals. It's kind of a patronizing. It's normally these wealthy, socioeconomically extremely well-educated, either straight allies, mostly men, I find, and obviously people who I guess are identifying as within LGBTQ, right? But so I find it, yeah, most of the time it's not trans identified people that give this pushback and call, use the hate speech card. It's just, there's a lot of brownie points to be gained here when you harp on somebody who's apparently a bigot. It's a wonderful opportunity to show how self-righteous and wonderful you are. So people will take that opportunity at any chance, and I find like it's almost anybody. Like I can't really pigeonhole it, to be honest. Maybe a generalized woke individual, right? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you raised the issue of wokeism, because I have experienced in the humanist movement of you said straight white males speaking on behalf of the phrase I've heard several times is, we must speak to give voice to the people who lack voice. But in fact, the people doing the speaking are straight white, often males.
Yeah, and I just love that irony, because if I remember correctly from my gender studies days, it's always, that is the target of all of their efforts, is the patriarchy, the white male straight guy. And that white male gay straight guy, it has, I don't know, he's atoning for his sins, or he must save the poor transgender individual, the immigrant. I mean, you see it across all of this, right? And if anybody reads my article in the C2C journal, surprise, it was 3 white males who attacked me, and 3 of them being benchers from the Law Society, right? So it's just incredible. Like, you have this, visible minority woman who pipes up, disrupts the narrative, and they had to shut it down. They're like, no. Let me tell you, sweetheart, what human rights is, and what a bigot you are. So I appreciate their enlightenment.
Okay, recently, just building on that, we have a U.S. Supreme Court nominee who is not trans, I understand, but she stated that she could not say what a woman was because she was not a biologist. If we cannot tell the difference between a man and a woman, then how can we have pronouns at all? Or alternatively, on what basis could any court determine what constitutes a correct pronoun?
I just recently read that, so that she was asked define some, I think this was in the Senate questioning period. She was asked, can you define a woman? And I thought it was a joke. A colleague had sent me that her answer was, quote, I do not know. Um, Listen, I was so floored. I was like, this has got to be a joke. So you are supposed to go to the top court of one of the strongest countries in this world, and you do not know what makes a biological woman because you're not a biologist. So that then curls into what I was trying to say is that the administration of justice, the confidence that we have in our courts, in judges, what are the optics when a judge says, I don't know, it can be anything. I don't know. And we have established law, the entire edifice of various areas of law, maternity leave, within the world of education, all of those rights, reproductive rights of women, and you're telling me you don't know? What did it not occur to you what that does to the public? And when I have read just general comments on news websites, and they're laughing at our courts now. They think it's a farce, especially when this pronoun thing came out in the UK initially. And I can talk, that's where I first got wind of this. When I did my research, like when this came out, I was like, has any other court in the Commonwealth done this? And then I looked, they did something similar in the UK, and the backlash that happened there. This is very concerning, to say the least. So, I mean, to answer your question, I'm not even sure if I'm answering your question. This is extremely concerning for the public's confidence in our justice system. And if you want to start to deconstruct everything in society, which is what I feel this agenda is, it's social deconstruction of everything, that everything is relative. I don't even know what the word morality, what does that even mean? It starts, they've already started the long march to the institutions. We've all heard of that. And, I kind of thought maybe this trend was on the decline, that maybe there would be some pushback. We have transgender rights. We get it. You deserve respect, rights as everyone else. But the kind of overtaking and the clash with other existing rights, I thought there might have been a bit of a pause that might be happening. And so with this judicial nominee and most likely appointment, I don't know, is she just kind of going on this trend that she knows she was, we also saw Biden just loves this stuff, right? I mean, his administration is all over it. So I don't know if I should be that surprised, but it's just really concerning. It's very, very concerning for especially something like the United States Supreme Court. It's just, yeah.
Well, it sounds like Judge Jackson is really attempting to avoid a controversy here by not talking about it, and in a way that's exactly what the woke or this lobby was doing in your case with regard to your articles. They didn't want people talking about it, and instead of debating you, and I got these words off of the internet because some of this was quite public. Public emails on listservs called you hateful, bigoted, racist, sexist, transphobic, alt-right. One lawyer even criticized your physical appearance.
Yeah.
How did this treatment affect your view of the legal profession in Canada since you got into the profession, as I gather from our interview, quite idealistic?
Yeah. So, I think I had to remind myself over and over again that letter that was signed by 200 lawyers they were not all lawyers. They were students and also legal secretaries. So when I read that, I was like, okay, well, there's over 130 licensed lawyers in Canada. We got a good chunk of 200 here that are quite ideological and will read. Again, I have to tell you, and I have caught some lawyers that admitted this, they didn't even read the article. So here's the human psychology. If I trust you, you're my trusted colleague. You say, Shahdin, I read this awful bigoted article. It's just terrible. You got to sign this petition, and I'm in the middle of a busy work day. I'll be like, well, I know Lloyd knows what he's talking about. I'm going to take his word for it. Absolutely. I'll put my name on it right away. I mean, there was one law firm where it was mandatory that you sign this letter. So everybody signed the letter. And I don't know what would happen if you did not sign the letter. So it's like the woke of the wokest, law firms. So I was like, initially, yeah, sure, it hurt my feelings and it was sad. And I was like, oh God, what is this going to do to my reputation? And then the emails of support flooded in. And I had talks and talks and talks with people. So no, it does not represent. I still have confidence in the legal profession, especially we can talk about what happened at the Law Society motion, where with my with a good friend, Jim Heller out of Victoria, who also we kind of joined forces to present a resolution to the Law Society of BC and say, do you know what's happened here? So while you guys were sleeping, this was happening offline. And so many lawyers were like, are you kidding me? These benchers did that to you? This young lawyer, all you've got is your reputation. You try to write an article, you try to discuss. So it blew up in their face. It actually, and they made valiant efforts. They got all these people, some other organizations to say, please don't vote for this hateful, bigoted resolution. It didn't work. It didn't work. There was and we can get into what the percentages were, but I know you're right. I did enter this profession quite idealistic, and I saw that, you know what, it's fine. There's going to be some with different opinions, but they're not the majority. Let's just put it that way. There's a silent majority here that, for obvious reasons and the impact to their profession, I had people twice my age saying, you're doing great, but I can't say this because I might lose my job, blah, blah, blah. They work in larger firms. They don't want to, disrupt. They're apolitical firms, right? They just do corporate stuff, just make a big buck, and that's it. I don't want to downgrade it, but that's how it is. Thankfully, I do work for a firm that was supportive of me and would have also been supportive if there was somebody in the same office that was against me. They're all about free speech and diversity of thought.
Excellent. You state that 200 lawyers, and actually many of them were not actual lawyers, but 200 people signed a petition to remove your article from Canadian Lawyer out of, what was it, 130,000 registered lawyers in Canada. How did so few people get so much power?
Oh, that's a good question. God bless Tim Wilbur. He's the editor of Canadian Lawyer magazine. There's a print version and there's an online version. He read my article. He saw, great, not a problem. I mean, and then he published it. I mean, when someone tells you that you really have to understand, I underestimated. So before I became the target of the cancel mob, I was like, you've seen others being like, Jordan Peterson, like a strong guy, an apparently strong guy like Jordan Peterson. I mean, it did affect his mental health. And even till this day, I think he said on his podcast many times, like, you do not underestimate what that does to you. And so if you're this editor trying to do your job and there's a board that you have to answer to and your job is on the line and you have 200 lawyers that are saying, we will never, provide our legal opinion for your paper anymore. I mean, I don't know. The logic didn't clue in. Maybe he said, "Wait a minute, this is just 200." Maybe I should think twice about this. I don't know. But he got spooked, just like the editor of the Advocate.
So for whatever reasons, he caved. But the woke, or whoever we are describing the opposition to you, I'll use the term woke, not satisfied with canceling your article twice, they wanted you fired from your law firm. And you mentioned that you received support from your firm. And I'd like to just read from the letter of support that was written by a member of your law firm. It says, and it's written to Claire Jennings, president of the BC branch of the Canadian Bar Association, quote, it is highly inappropriate for you to use your position to publicly suggest that what Shahdin has done is in any way analogous to slavery, genocide, or to allege that Shahdin opposes transgender and non-binary people existing. This latter suggestion is a demonstrably false allegation against Shahdin, and unfortunately one that I fear other CBA members might accept as truth simply because of the position you hold. While you're thankful that your law firm stood up for your right of free speech, you've suffered damages. Have you ever considered legal action against Ms. Jennings or the CBA?
Yeah, I have. The damages portion is something that it's difficult. Defamation is a very difficult claim to make out. But at the end, and this ties back to what we were discussing, and which I should get into the institutional advantage that these groups have, because I think when you said Claire Jennings, I don't think everybody knows who that is and what precipitated that response. So we'll go back and state that, but just a point that not just with CBA, I mean, those ventures, anyone in my position would have been like, whoa, if I lost my job, you better believe I would have sued. And I can say this openly and publicly, because there's your damages, right? So I'm out of a job for doing something that I mean, nobody wants to ostensibly have someone in their firm that's a bigot. I understand that. I mean, that there's also an employment law case. I don't think that those are really grounds to fire someone. But anyways, the point is that I thought about it long and hard. You have a right to call me a bigot. I can't take that away from you. So I looked at them and I was like, and I really don't, I mean, we won't get into this, but I don't really believe in hate speech. I know that there's an actionable cause of action where there is hate speech, there's discrimination, but it's so dangerous for me, the word hate speech, and that this completely nebulous concept that you can it's just whatever what you subjectively think is hate, that I mean, people can call me, I mean, you reminded me of the reference to slavery and genocide, this like hyperbolic nonsense of a letter. Fill your boots. You have the right to say it. And if people are going to accept that at face value without reading the letter, well, they're quite. I mean, I think that's the first thing that lawyers do is we read. You don't sign. You got to read first. So. And that's where I found who their allies are and who are maybe have a bit shallower thinking.
Okay.
So,
Shahdin, you mentioned your colleague Jim Heller a couple of times. He moved a motion and you seconded it to the AGM of the BC Law Society last year, and I'd like to read the resolved part. It's resolved that A, the membership affirms its commitment to rational and unfettered discourse on any and all issues regarding the directives. And B, the membership affirms that no topic that relates to our profession and the administration of justice should be exempt from open debate. Now, that motion was defeated by a vote of 1,948 to 1,415. I am amazed that you subsequently said that you viewed this as a victory of sorts. How so?
I believe that in that tabulation, there was over 300 members who abstained, so they didn't vote, neither for nor against. And I think if you do the percentages, I think it's something like 42 or something percent. I have to do the math right, but I remember that Jim and I did the math and we're like, wow, that's a big chunk of lawyers that are like, wait a minute, yeah, we should discuss this as we should discuss other issues. So I thought that was a win, because the way that this mob sold it, if you are saying that what I'm saying is genocidal, and there's over 42% of our lawyers in BC who did decide to vote, of course there's many that just don't vote, who are saying, no, we should be discussing this issue. It's a court procedure matter. It affects our practice as lawyers. It affects our clients' interests. And of course, our professional obligations. I mean, we don't know what happens if you refuse to do it. Am I going to get hauled in front of the law society? Am I going to get costs awarded against my client? I'd like to know that. Should we not discuss this? Should we not perhaps take this back to the judges and ask for clarification? So no, there's a good chunk of lawyers here that are saying, no, this is not genocidal. This is not bigotry. I think this is actually a valid issue that she's raising, and not just me, but lawyers who would like to discuss this. The amount of lawyers that contacted me that were like, I had no clue this happened. So the way that Jim worded the resolution is he just wanted to say, so the whereas is just give you the background. So whereas court direction is published in December 2020, whereas there's this letter that is published by a member, whereas, there's a backlash, whereas it's not published. Then she goes for her second try. Then we go for the third try, and it's finally published. I think the lawyers were just shocked that this happened, and the efforts. Now this is, if I can just go back. Okay, so this is what happens. Okay, so you have the Canadian Bar Association of BC, you have the Canadian Bar Association of Canada. There's also other legal associations. I mean, you can have as many associations as you want. Trial Lawyers Association of BC, Vancouver, the specific Vancouver Bar. So in any city, there's the Kelowna Bar Association. These are organizations which the Vancouver Bar Association, the Trial Lawyers Association of BC, they issued. So while we were, I guess you could say, leading up to the vote, they all issued, the Vancouver Bar Association, Trial Lawyers Association of BC, and the CBA BC, which is the one that Claire Jennings wrote a letter. So we advise you not to vote for this resolution. It's bigoted, it's hateful. Now, here's the problem. Yes, they have a right to do this, but you're writing as the president of an organization with thousands of lawyers as their members. You are purporting to speak on behalf of all of them. So the managing partner of my firm said, wait a minute, we and a whole bunch of us here are part of this organization, and you have the audacity to issue this letter against one of our lawyers here? That's your opinion. That's your opinion. Don't go and purport to speak on behalf of everyone. So this is what happens when the CBA subsection SOGIT goes off and reports to the judges or goes off to the Supreme Court of Canada is their next task. We are an organization on behalf of this many thousand lawyers in Canada, and then they go off into what they want, and there's like this like liaison individual from the CBA that is like a liaison where you can be connected formally with the court, whether it's the Supreme Court of Canada or the provincial court, and they purport to speak on behalf of all these other lawyers. And that's the institutional advantage, right? They get the ear of the judges thinking, well, this is a legitimate group. This is very important. I should listen to them. And they don't think, hey, there's this other huge gap of communication. And that's what I found out throughout this whole process. I found out that we are completely voiceless, the one-off lawyer. There could be many of us. What do we do when we want to give our opinion? We write to the advocate. The advocate decides we can't publish this. Where else do we go? We know it's improper to send, you only do it in like very, very important situations, to send a letter directly to judges. They don't really like that. We try to keep that separate, right? That's why we have these kind of circular routes of connecting with judges. Is there another paper that we could write to? That's why we were thinking like, this is, the whole game here is rigged against us. We have no avenue of communication with the courts. So just to wrap up what I was saying is that when the likes of the CBABC president, Claire Jennings, who is completely sympathetic to this agenda, as well as TLABC, the Trial Lawyers of BC, and the Vancouver Bar Association send these letters on behalf of their membership, it floored me. I couldn't believe they were taking these lengths to try and demolish Jim and I's reputation and the resolution. And it did not work. Because if you told me it was 99% won, okay, wow, there you go. No, but it did not work. So for me, 42% plus, that's something that maybe you wanna pay attention to.
Okay, so you had a powerful establishment declaring that there is no debate. And what your motion showed is that 42% of the lawyers in BC, without having a firm background on what was going on, said, yes, there is a debate. And so, in a sense, is that something you can build on?
Well, I think that a lot of them, I think one thing that I would hope that lawyers are ready to say is, listen, I just got wind of this issue. Okay, we were dealing with, the world is dealing with COVID. We're all just trying to live our lives here in this in that moment. Clearly this fell beneath their radar. And this goes back to just myself. Okay, I woke up, if you will, in January of 2020. So I would classify myself as totally woke up to January 2020. Okay, when certain things happened that I was like, oh, wait a minute, that doesn't seem right. And I don't need to get into those details, but there were some things that happened in my personal life that I was like, that woke me up. So here I am, this youngish kind of lawyer, and only in January of 2020 did I start to kind of question this narrative. Remember, I went to university at SFU, which is extremely left-wing. I did gender studies. I was all about anti-patriarchy, this, and I was all over that, okay? Now, so the fact that these lawyers come, a lot of them just said, listen, I don't know what this issue is. Like, I'm not going to learn everything that happened here within one resolution, but all I know is there's much more that I need to educate myself about in order to have an informed debate. Maybe those lawyers who abstained, that's what they felt. They felt, okay, I don't know what this is about, so I'm not going to say yes or no. But I think there was a good chunk that said, let's just discuss, right? That's all at the end of the be it resolved. I don't know if you could maybe even read that again. All we were saying is no issue is off the table here. I mean, we talk about euthanasia, abortion. I mean, legal issues are always controversial and prickly and difficult, and they invoke a lot of emotion in us. But that's what we do. I just, like, why is it that the trans thing is off the table? It's not off the table. So, and clearly, lawyers, a good chunk of them, and I know many did not even vote, think that. So, as far as I'm concerned, Jim and I, we did what we had to do. We accomplished our goal. We did. The Law Society wants to just kind of, everything is apolitical. They don't like media attention. They want to pretend like everything is not controversial. I think going forward, they're going to see some more pushback and I can get into some other issues, but I mean, our Law Society's all over this, and I'm thinking we're going to have to be more vigilant going forward, because if you stay asleep like I was, I mean, this stuff happens overnight. You wake up and you're like, what? Oh, okay. They changed the law on this. They changed the law on that. So you have to stay on top of it.
What advice would you give to other or new young lawyers who still find merit in the adversarial justice system? What points of view would you want to give to them? What would you like them to consider?
Okay, so there is a lot of reason right now for lawyers, whether my vintage or older, to say, the hell with this. This ship has sailed. It's in everything. It's in all of our institutions. You just have to accept that there's some things that you just can never discuss, and it's ideological, and the court and our law societies, nurses associations, teachers. If you take that view that you should just stick your head in the sand and just do your work and not raise a fuss, you are the problem. Okay, I stuck my head out, and I don't even know. I mean, it was by the grace of God maybe that I had a law firm that was supportive. But honestly, even if it wasn't supportive, I would have just had to deal with it. I would have had to fight with it. I didn't come. My mother did not bring me to this country for me to just to pretend that the reality is not reality. For me to pretend that this language is what it is, and you can't control my language. I get it. Let's have a discussion. Yes, these are really difficult issues. I know that there's a whole slew of rights here. There's a whole conundrum here. I don't even know what the answer really is, and what has to happen in court. But for you to tell me that we can't discuss this, and I'm just supposed to go ahead and pretend like I'm living in some free democratic society, when clearly this democratic society is being tested on many fronts, not just this front. Don't give up. And I'm glad that there have been some young lawyers actually still in law school that got wind of this and contacted me. Because even the law schools, they are making these issues non-issues. There are not just this, but many issues you cannot discuss. There is no other side. That's extremely concerning, and I really hope that these younger lawyers and even older lawyers, especially the ones who've made their money and they have their pension plan, speak up, because I didn't want this to fall all on my shoulders, and I know it hasn't, but it was quite sad that I have these old timers telling me, offline, good job. It's like, well, what about you? What about you to stand up for why you went into law?
Well, what is your I got one more question before I open this up for discussion to the general group here. But what does the future hold for Shahdin Farsai?
At this point, like any, again, lawyer who's at their, 5-7 years I've been practicing, I've lost track. I'm still young. I still need to learn my craft. I just want to do law. Like, I just want to be a good lawyer. I want to serve my clients. And I've had clients from every strand of that rainbow. I treat them with respect, with kindness. I try to provide good service. I try to be a good human being every single day. We have to see, trust me, what happened was not a fun exercise for me to go through. Will I be a bit more careful? Am I a little bit scared? At this point, again, there's something that if some other issue, again, and there already are many issues that comes up, and if I can't stay silent, and I'm just going to have to do my best to give my 2 cents. All I did was I tried to give my 2 cents, and it can't just be me. And I know it's not just me, and others will hopefully join, add their voices to the various debates that come through. But I think that for the span of my life and my career, and depending on how this country goes, because I am honestly concerned about Canadian democracy, and the weakening of our institutions, especially with all these new laws that are coming out about hate speech, about controlling content online. I am worried, and I don't really know what the future will hold for me at this point. I'd like to be in law for, a good chunk of time ahead. But I mean, it's not off the table. I don't know politics. I don't know what other avenue I can try to help with these societal issues. So I'm not satisfied just putting my head down and working and letting all these social issues go on ahead, and not giving my 2 cents, or my assistance. And I'm not really sure how that's going to pan out. I just don't know at this point.
Okay, well, whatever your future holds, whatever your endeavors, I know that that we wish you well and wish you success. And on that note, I would like to open this meeting for discussion. Robert, are you keeping tab of anybody who has their hand up, or how do you want to operate this? George has a question.
Yes, yeah. People should be able to put up their hand using the reaction icon on the bottom of the screen. So, yeah, go ahead, George, please.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very informative and very disturbing at the same time. I would just like to add a couple of comments, please, about the institutional dangers that we're seeing. I recently retired as a teacher at the Royal Ontario Museum, just before the pandemic actually made me retire. An institution I believe in, and I'm really proud of the work I and my colleagues did there in the education department for many years. Just a couple of quick examples. And I think this is a positive example. We were asked no longer to greet groups coming in as hello, boys and girls, or hello, ladies and gentlemen. We were asked to say, welcome everyone. I thought that was okay. I thought that was a good thing, because there are some people who don't identify one way or the other. So to me, that was a positive kind of thing. I was happy to do that. But we were also told not to use the term handicap in any discussion, because it comes from being cap in hand, begging for something. Well, historically, etymologically, that's not true. So I continued to use the word handicap because it's an appropriate term. I used to teach lessons about Canadian history. Kids could have a chance to handle artifacts. One was a Pontiac hood decoration from an American car. And in that discussion, we talked about using native imagery to sell things. And in the course of that conversation, I raised the question of sports teams like the Washington Redskins. And I said specifically, I think that name should be changed. I think it's inappropriate. I was taken to task by a superior telling me not to use the term. And I pointed out it's a wonderful teachable moment, for the kids to understand why that term is offensive and why maybe it should be changed. I was still told, don't talk about it. It might make somebody uncomfortable. We had a very excellent exhibition on Japanese art, ukiyo-e, the woodblock print. A Japanese curator put on a great show called A Third Gender. And essentially, it was about young men who worked in brothels in samurai Japan, and how they serviced both men and women. And the point was, they actually represented a third gender. It was a great exhibition, but that point was simply wrong. They were simply young men who serviced both men and women. They weren't a third gender. So that began to concern me when I saw that sort of thing happening. So my basic point is, even great institutions like the Royal Ontario Museum are being more and more subject to this kind of thinking and trying to shut down debate on important issues where museums should be discussing very important issues all the time. And finally, I just want to say, I have two friends who are, one an elementary school teacher, one a high school teacher, and they both wrote to me yesterday and today, respectively, saying that what they're being told now is they can't do anything to make students uncomfortable in class. So there's to avoid discussing any kind of controversial issue that might make anybody uncomfortable. I'm really worried about that. So I think it all just ties into the specific issue you were facing, Shahdin, in your really unfortunate situation.
What's so difficult about when I hear, good, kind-hearted people like yourself who just kind of say, yeah, that saying the name of the Redskins, or oh yeah, I could see how that's offensive. it seems like that's why I'm almost like a free speech absolutist, is because that's what happens, right? When you open that door, and that's offensive. That's offensive. Okay, I don't want to hurt that person's feelings. I mean, that's how this all started. Like it's very difficult, and I don't know exactly what's the right answer, because I get it. I know, as a Middle Easterner, if somebody called me the sand N-word, I mean, I don't care. I know who I am. I know who I am. And that just reflects that person. Oh, that's offensive. You can't say that to me. It's gonna like disintegrate myself. And so then I see this like desire to say, sure, of course, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And then we have that, what you just said, your friends in school, The Coddling of the American Mind, a wonderful book, which is exactly that, like safe spaces and comfort. It's like, what has, Lloyd, you're the psychologist, what has happened on the grand collective psychological reflection of society that we've become so utterly fragile? I just don't get it. Like, I mean, even 10 years ago, you could crack a joke and it's like, okay, it's a joke. I mean, my friends make fun of me. They throw Muslim jokes at me, and I'm just like, and I throw a joke right back at them. And everything is just so uptight and stifling.
Yeah, I did an article using the metaphor of a mind virus to describe Wokism. And one thing that I missed in the article, which if I had to rewrite the article, I would include it, is that Wokism is an evolved feature that's not exactly a political ideology, because it has pieces from various sources, various ideologies, various movements, and one of them that I missed was the self-esteem movement of the 1980s. Now, when it comes to the fragility that you're seeing in protecting students from any controversy that they might find disturbing, that can be traced to the self-esteem movement. And we have a bizarre situation. In fact, the data supported this in the 1990s, that in terms of self-esteem, math self-esteem, Chinese and Japanese math students had lower math self-esteem than North American students, but they were much better at math. This has been brewing for some time, and I think we're just seeing the extension of, in part, the self-esteem movement, but united, of course, with a kind of neo-Marxism, but also a kind of fascism, because some of it, through postmodernism, can be traced to Martin Heidegger. And so what we have here is a cultural phenomena. And I'm sorry to get onto this topic, but you asked me the question, and this is some of the background that I think is affecting what we're seeing with respect to George's experience, and Shahdin, your own very powerful experience that you've been wonderful about sharing with us today. Any more questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. This is Gleb here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. Let me apologize first for not having my picture up. Kids stole my web camera for a good reason. Yeah. So, then thanks a lot, Shahdin, for your presentation, for sharing your story. It's very interesting, and not to say that is new to me, at least, right? That's happening all over the map. So my question is ultimately gonna boil down to those two questions: whose fault is this, and what to do, right? I spoke with Lloyd about this briefly, right? So really, where I'm coming from is that people have split into those bubbles where they discuss those things among each other, right? Like we can talk about woke and people, I'm sure, who are on a phone call right now here in this Zoom meeting, they're all kind of against woke, to put it bluntly, right? So this is our little bubble. So there are other bubbles who talk about pro-woke or whatever, right? So my question would be really, how do we break out of those bubbles? How do we start? How can we change the narrative? How can we reverse from the direction we are going into right now? From what you said and from my observation, basically, the narrative has been pushed down onto lawyers, educators, and physicians from up there, right? So that's, to me, it's pretty obvious, right? So, and that's why the communication is so difficult. That's why reversing this trend is so difficult, because you've been all the lines of communication have been disabled. Someone speaks on your behalf, whether you're a lawyer, an educator, or a physician. Someone already has made a decision that this is the truth, right? And you cannot challenge it. So, in your opinion, whose fault is this? Who is ultimately pushing this from up? Who is at the top? Shall we blame, or who shall we go against? That's the first part of my question. And the second is how everybody can help you and everybody else. What can we do? How can we push it? Either it's pushing from the bottom or affecting the top somehow. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that myself, and that's why I'm asking. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So I never conceptualized this as it's coming from the top down. So this has been, I mean, if you read, from my research, this has been brewing, like within the postmodern movement. It's been brewing since the 80s. They've been working on this, right? I remember a friend who's a music history professor. He was giving me examples of Wokism way back in the 1990s in the universities, and it was growing. It was still a little bit, the professors did a lot to get it in the universities. So I don't think it's a top down type of thing. I have my theories of why it became so pervasive, and this has to do with the disintegration of I guess you could say religion. It's kind of psychologically compensating for the lack of religion. This, to me, wokeism is, if that's not religion, I don't know what is, right? Mm-hmm. A sense of order, which we're lacking. It's actually a moral code. If you put it all together, it's a very strict code. So now, whose fault is it? So it's, I think, everyone's fault. I kind of use the example that you deserve the government that you have.
Yeah,
so
I agree with that.
Yeah, so to sit back and complain about the government, and, I don't want to go into politics because politics is just a game. It's like, well, then, how can you complain? So what happened is I was at fault. I mean, in a way, I don't know. I mean, I just kind of I was fed that education from Simon Fraser. Parts of it was good. I'm not saying it was all bad. I beat that same drum as everyone else. And then there was an aha moment. So I feel like and remember, I'm a nobody. Like, I'm just like this lawyer in working in BC, and I wrote one article, and look what happened. So all these teachers, all these other nurses, they are sticking their heads in the sand, and they're afraid. And it's ridiculous that we're living in Canada, and the atmosphere of fear. Test it. Don't just be. I guess this leads also to your second question: is what do we do? If you're aware, I'm now a bit more. I'm a bit more courageous talking to anybody about this. They could be as woke as anything, and I'm like, yeah, I actually don't agree with that. Yeah, I'm actually a little bit critical about some of this stuff. Even some of the, I'm the vaccine issue. I'm fully vaccinated, love vaccines, but I'm a little critical about the steps that the government has taken. You just put it out there. What's the worst that can happen in those personal one-on-one conversations? And if you are courageous enough to write, you use this. This is your weapon. Just write and see what happens. And I hate to use him as an example, but you have Peterson, right? He's just this prof. He's been working for 20 plus years, raised a family, and then something happened, and he's like, I'm going to start YouTube videos about that. Nobody knew who the hell he was, and then see what happens, right? So the lines of communication are blocked, but that doesn't mean you can't start your own.
Yeah,
So-
and I wrote on both issues, on the Wokism in education, and as well as what's going on in the medical stuff, COVID vaccination wise, right? So, not helping. What can I say? All right, I understand that maybe I'm contributing a little bit, but it looks like we're kind of losing.
yeah.
Yeah.
I see Kerry Lind has his hand up. Maybe he can answer that, Gleb.
Oh, I just want to say and be so politically incorrect, but I turn 80 in 2 months, and I think that Shahdin is what we would have said a long time ago, such a brave, respectful, and such a broad. I mean, this woman is so out there and so strong. She's on the right side of history. She's got it made. But let me say a couple of things. The woke benchers, some of them said that there's some issues like pronouns, there's only one side to be heard. And I think that any law student who makes it through law school and can possibly believe that some Canadian citizens are disentitled to be represented or to say something should not graduate. And any lawyers who believe that should go off for a year of, I was going to say some kind of re-education, but then I'd be accused of being a Maoist. I don't know what they have to do. They should be kicked out. It's just reprehensible that they can argue as lawyers that there's only one side to some issues. The Law Society has recently mandated that lawyers have to take 12 hours of First Nations, First Peoples, Aboriginal peoples' histories and everything. That's fantastic. That's great. But imagine if I stood up and I said, to hell with you. I'm not going to do it. There's no two sides to the Aboriginal story. It's all white men, and that's all it should be, not even women. How far would I get before I was rightly castrated? Anyway, the fundamental problem here is, and oh, by the way, to answer the question of where did this come from, it's come out of the academy. It's anybody who does a serious analysis knows that it was a virus that was hatched in the academy, in the universities, in the same way that the COVID virus appears to have been hatched in a live animal food market. But anyway, I just support my friend Shahdin for everything she's done. And I've met her and her husband together, and he's a lucky man, and she's lucky to have him.
Well, Kerry, I think that, I think you've already interviewed Kerry, but Kerry is the one that I reached out to before I even wrote the article. I had read the decision, and he's an exact example that I reference in my essay about a lawyer who's there defending a father who would like his daughter, who's a minor, 11-year-old, to not go through hormone therapy, possibly irreversible impact on her little body. And then you have the minor who, of course, has every right to make their case. And in this way, yeah, I'll use their pronoun, their case. The father is going to use the she pronoun. Now imagine he comes to court and he has to use the child's preferred pronoun. What happened to the father's rights? He's there defending the father. And the entire time we're already conceding ground here. He'd like to continue having a daughter. Is that the crime? That's the adversarial system. So you make your pitch, the child will make their pitch, and the judge will decide. But right off the bat, imagine if Carrie's tongue is tied, you know? And so when I read that decision, I mean, there were so many other problems with the Court of Appeal decision about that other case. But Carrie was one of those valiant lawyers who took on an extremely unpopular case. And he was just in the media and other lawyers, not popular at all. But he did what lawyers do. You take on unpopular positions, but then you can't be, you know, you can't have your tongue tied and your discretion of how you proceed with your case be dictated by political correctness and dangers of hurt feelings. So thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Carrie, for your work.
Thank you.
If I can respond just a little bit to Glebe's question, Carrie's a good example of the kind of response that we're looking for, I think. But I'd like to reference something that Jim Heller did, and it's unfortunate that he's not with us. I'm glad that you invited him specifically, Shahdin. But Jim came to your defense when the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation interviewed a Professor Margot Young, who called your article hate speech, even though she had not read it. Now, what Jim did is he contacted CBC both by telephone and by email and forced the issue and got some facts. He forced the CBC to do another interview. That's the kind of thing that I think needs to happen, that the woke want to shut down debate because they fear that they're going to lose points if they shut down, if they debate issues. They're going to have to give something, and the antidote then is to keep promoting the debate through written word, through broadcasts such as this, which will be shared on the internet, and any means possible in order to gather more people, make more people aware of this risk to what in essence is Enlightenment. Enlightenment values the Enlightenment view that as individuals we can determine truth based on evidence, and that we don't have to be told of what the truth is. And I respect your point, Shahdin, that Wokism is, if it's not a religion, it's very much like a religion in that it tells you what to believe. And that the individual does not have the freedom then to have alternate beliefs or different beliefs.
Exactly.
So anyway, I think that's the measure. Anyway, any other questions? It's now been about, well, it's been almost an hour and a half. Let's put let's put one more question to the group here, and then we're going to have to wrap it up.
Got a question.
Okay.
Shahdin, hi. I just wanted to thank you for the amazing story you're telling here in terms of things. I'm wondering what I want to step back though is you said you had it comes from a strong education and background with respect to the left. You say you were totally woke up to 2020, and I'm interested in the story of going from being woke to being not woke, because this is the path that we want to see how this happens. How can somebody who's woke become unwoke? So you did it. If you can do it, others can do it. Could you explain a little bit about how did you get out of this, and does that provide any kind of guidance to approaching this woke mindset? Could you explain a little bit about that?
Gosh, I mentioned earlier how Carrie was kind of instrumental in all of this. I I can't remember when I reached out to him. It was when the decision came out. One of the pivotal points for me was I read the decision, AB versus CD 2020 BCCA, and I don't know the rest of the citation. I was just, I do this, I read decisions that come out of the Court of Appeal. And I was like, well, what's this one about? Just reading it. I get these like case digests, right, in my email box. So I'm reading it and I'm just like, oh, I vaguely remember that there were some people at my firm that were, oh, we're going to go down to the courthouse and watch the submissions on this case. And I had heard something about child hormone therapy. And I was like, I was just, doing my own files. And I was like, okay, whatever. I didn't really think about it further. And by the way, the whole thing, I was asleep during the whole Jordan Peterson pronoun thing. Again, I was like, what's that? What's this even about? Look, I didn't even pay attention. Okay. Like that was in 2016 or something. So again, shows you how in my narrow zone I was. So then I'm reading this case and I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I read. And then I read to the bottom and I was like, okay, so the final outcome was a preteen was then given the green light. I was like, we can go into the merits, but I was like, no, this can't possibly be right. Like if I don't know where we went from, the mature minor law, case law to this type of invasive procedure, which is not even scientifically fully investigated yet. And I just thought these are minors, like we're not protecting them. Like, what if this stuff is really harmful? And I was like, this is like, what the hell just happened here? Right? I mean, there are so many children that go through the variations of gender dysphoria and they turn out to be either just gay, lesbian, whatever, straight, whatever it is. But wait, like prematurely, like all the data that I then did my own research to write an article, which is on the Canley website, discussing how that decision was incorrect on other various grounds. The court just did not have proper evidence before it about the impact of these procedures. And so I was just like floored. And that's when I saw how strong the political climate, that the political correct narrative at that moment, especially in a place like Vancouver, which is like, I mean, it is so woke. It is, and these judges didn't even say, hey, hang on. Like, let's give the father an opportunity to put forward the proper evidence, which he didn't get that chance. Various procedural mishaps happened and things like that. And that's where I was like, this can't be happening. Like that just looked it just did something to me. I couldn't even sleep. I don't know. It just did something to me. So that is what woke me up. And I mean, maybe for other people who are in the woke zone, sometimes you need to give them these examples and say, do you know how, for example, like women's only spaces are being impacted by this? Do you know what women are saying whose voices are now being muffled? Because again, the wisdom of these men are telling them, no, you are going to share this room with biological men and you have no say in it whatsoever. Do you know what that does? What about the impact on the world of athletics? The women have been training their whole lives and they're always going to lose. What does that even affect your conception of fairness? Fair athletic spirit of competition. I don't know. It worked for me. It snapped me out of it. It snapped me out of a lot of my woke beliefs. So could that work for other people? So in your life, when you go and you have these discussions, maybe just posit some of these questions, right? Just say, well, what do you think of this? Like, and sometimes they may say, yeah, I get your point, but I still think it should be that way. It's okay, but just maybe push them a little bit. The narrative is so deep. And when you say, when all it takes is one other person saying, well, maybe I don't agree with that. And you're like, oh, it's possible that maybe there is another way. It's so strong. But at least just having the discussion could And in my case, I don't know, it was just by fluke that I read that decision, and I took a year off to live with my husband overseas, and I was just trying to keep up with case law, and I read this decision, and I was horrified.
I think, Shahdin, you point your finger on a key element with respect to the New Enlightenment Project, because in your examination, the story you're telling us in terms of examining this case is the primacy of your sense of human rights and fairness was the part of the element that triggered you out of this woke mindset, that there's something wasn't right here, something wasn't squaring with you, and that something had to do entirely with respect to fairness and equality and human rights. These are core humanist values.
Yeah, and so, I think in that case it was something very it was like children, right? The protection of children from irreversible surgeries and hormonal, like that. I just was like, this is like it's reminding me of like the experiments that were done during World War II. I was like, what in the world are we doing? So that I guess children's rights is what snapped me out of it.
There you go. So I think there's an element then of it's not simply somebody saying, oh, I disagree, although for some, in certain cases that may work. But in this case, what helped you get beyond that simple, oh yeah, there are people debates, we can debate things pro and con or whatever. It touched upon underlying values.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that helped you get out of that.
Yeah, that's precisely it.
Yeah, I want to thank you, Shahdin, for your insights into this difficult topic.
My pleasure.
I want to tell everybody that this Shahdin's article and the letter that her employer, her law firm, wrote on her behalf that I quoted part of in today's interview, it can be found on the NEP website under our blog. The New Enlightenment Project is committed to increasing civil discussion of controversial topics such as this one. You can visit our website at nep-Humanism.ca or catch our podcasts, and this will be listed as a webinar on this forum. You can catch it at YouTube at nep-humanism.ca. And I see Ulrich has just posted this on the chat.
Okay.
Thank you, Ulrich.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This was a real pleasure. Sometimes I forget about the drama that happened, and I've just kind of, gone ahead with my life. So it's good to know that I can still discuss this. And it also keeps me alert in terms of what maybe we should be doing next and what I should be doing next. Because this fight it's going to be on for the next 30 years. I can guarantee. It took 30 years to get us here. It's going to take 30 years to get us out.
Well, there's another annual general meeting coming up in October.
There you go. We'll keep the people at the Law Society entertained.
Take care, everybody.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.